I'm Will Kiddo from Squirrel, and this is packing a base parachute. We're going to start out by putting the pull-up cords into the closing loops. For this pack job, we're using 2 pull-up cords, 1 in each closing loop. Before you start your pack job, you want to make sure your parachute is hooked up correctly by doing a continuity check. So we're going to put each line between the fingers of one hand. If you have more lines than you have fingers, then use another hand. This allows us to easily see that all lines are routed correctly. You don't have any tangles. No lines are routed over the top or in between each other. Once you have checked one riser group, set it off to the side and then move on to the next. So start with the rears, move to the fronts. Now, if you hooked up your canopy correctly, this should be pretty quick and easy because you've already done it. But it's good to do this before every pack job. That way, you're 100% sure that everything is hooked up correctly. Adding a clamp to the risers helps keep symmetry. We're going to add a weight to the pack job so that as we're packing the parachute, we're not dragging the container along the ground. Grab the front risers with your left hand and the rear risers and brake lines with your right hand. Run up the lines to the bottom of the canopy. Give it a swing to keep tension on the lines and lay the canopy on its side. Now the nose should be pointing to the left and the tail to the right. This step of laying the canopy on its side is definitely optional. Once you get more experience with this pack job, you may not need to do this part at all. Our goal for this step is to make the canopy as neat and tidy as possible. Placing clamps on the top surface near the packing tabs so everything will stay organized through the subsequent steps. Smooth out each of the 7 cells, keeping tension on the lines. The A-lines do not have corresponding packing tabs, so you'll have to place a clamp on the top surface in line with the A-lines. For each line section, B, C, and D, place a clamp near its corresponding packing tab. Setting the brakes. We're doing a slider down pack job because it's a little bit different than normal skydiving. So this is how it works. A quick way to remember this is from the point of view of the set loop on the riser. Line, ring, toggle. So run the set loop through the line, then run it through the ring, then run the toggle through the loop. That's line, ring, toggle. Make sure you route the excess brake line towards the inside of the riser. That way it's out of the way as you reach up for the toggles during opening. Once the brakes are set, you're going to add a weight to the pack job. Just like in a skydiving pack job, run up the lines by grabbing the brake lines, rear risers, and fronts in between separate fingers. All of this over-the-shoulder pro pack job section should be exactly like a skydiving pack job, but we try to make it as neat as possible. Sort out the nose sections for all 7 cells. Hold the nose between your legs and start flaking between each line group. Flaking and cleaning the inside between line groups and straightening the outside between folds. Right now the clamps on the packing tabs are acting like weights to help create the wanted folds. We will eventually move the pack job to the ground and clean up all these areas in finer detail, so it isn't imperative that everything is perfect right now. However, the cleaner you make it now, the easier it will be to clean it up and make it perfect once it's on the ground. Once you've finished flaking one side, repeat this process for the other side. Now things are going to start getting a bit different from a skydiving pack job. We're about to put the canopy on the ground, and before we do, we're going to split the nose. 3 cells to the left, 3 cells to the right. The center stays in the center. So now is when the clamps on the packing tabs are the most useful. We're going to keep the clamps and the lines in the center of the pack job and flake the folded sections to the outside. We're going to start at the nose and make sure you have all 3 nose sections cleanly laying to the side. Place your foot on the A-line clamp and then hold the B-line clamp a little bit out and clean the material between the clamps. You're making sure that you're only flaking the 3 cells on this side of the canopy, and the center cell stays in the center. You can give it a little bit of a flip to the material to get it to lay nice and square to the outside. When this section looks good, we're going to move on to the next section. Place your foot on the B-line clamp now, and grab the C-line clamp. Make things clean and square. Once this section looks good, we move on to the C's and D's, repeating these same steps to make it look as clean as possible. We can ignore the tail for now and move on to the other side of the canopy. With this side cleaned, we need to do the same thing for the other side of the canopy. Roll the other side up and expose the nose, and repeat this whole cleaning process for the second side. Now Matt Lodge is going to show us how to clean up the inside. Find and align all the A-line attachment points. Place them on the ground and use your foot to hold them in place. Move up to the B-line attachment points, gather all 4 on each side, and flake between the A's and the B's. Once the material is flaked between the A's and the B's, you can now transfer your foot up to the B-line attachment points. Keep those in place and move your hands up to the C-line attachment points. Gather all 4 on each side, make sure everything's nice and neat, and flake between the B's and the C's. Once those are nice and neat, move up to the D's and repeat. The D-line attachment points in general are the messiest because there's more and more space for them to go where they want. So just take your time, make sure you find all 4 attachment points, and make sure everything's nice and neat and flaked. The tail can be a little bit confusing when you're first learning how to pack. What you want to do is align each seam. Some seams look like they have double stitches, some look like they have single stitches, but whenever you see a seam on the tail, it should be aligned with the center of the pack job and the excess material flaked to the outside. The trailing edge seam should be perpendicular to the pack job. Once everything is flaked, all lines are nice and neat towards the center, you can attach the tailgate. So the easiest way to do this is to start back at the riser end of the lines. Grab the control lines and the inside C and D lines. Usually parachutes will have color coding on the line so you know which ones to grab. But grab these lines and then slowly and carefully run up the lines, making sure not to tangle with any other lines as you get towards the pack job. You'll find the tailgate usually attached to the center C line on the left side. Wrap the tailgate around and attach with a rubber band. In place of a tailgate, you can use a small piece of masking tape. A single wrap of tape around the control lines and center C and D lines should do the trick. Once you have the tailgate attached and everything is flaked, you can remove the top clamp and bring the tail pocket down to the bottom seam of the canopy. So open the tail pocket, being careful not to move the pack job around too much. You're about to drag the container across the grounds, so remove any weight you may be using. Sitting on your pack job while you stow the lines helps keep everything nice and neat. With the tail pocket open, take about a 2.5 inch bite of all the lines and wrap it with the rubber band underneath the tail pocket. In general, it's good to use a large rubber band and do a double wrap around this primary stow. Once you have the bite stowed, tuck it underneath the tail pocket and out of the way. First, route the lines straight up to the center of the tail pocket, then start figure eighting from there. Reach across to the line with your thumb pointed at yourself as you bring each loop up towards the tail pocket. Figure eight the lines towards the mouth of the tail pocket, making them smaller as they progress. With one hand at a time, while keeping the other hand in place, keeping the already looped lines from moving. Make sure loops cascade down towards the mouth of the tail pocket so that loops cannot capture each other. The goal here is to allow the lines to pay out cleanly without looping around each other. Once all the lines are in place, secure the Velcro of the tail pocket making sure that all lines are captured in the tail pocket with no loose lines routed around through corners. Align the risers evenly spaced apart towards the outside of the finished pack job. We're going to do reduction folds so that the width of the pack job will easily fit inside the closed container. More often than not, the tail pocket is a good size indicator for what will fit inside the container. So try and make the pack job the same width as the tail pocket when you're doing reduction folds. You can do 1 or 2 folds towards the center of the pack job. Now is a good time to S-fold the nose under the pack job and capture it with the clamp. Clamps can be handy here to keep things in place while you're moving the pack job around. Gently lift on the pack job, bring the bottom of the pack job down to the bottom of the container so the tail pocket is resting against that bottom flap. So make sure the risers are laying flat with the toggles facing either inside or outside based on your preference, and there are no kinks in either the risers or the container, so everything is laying flat, nice and smooth. And then create a single fold exposing the nose. Now we're going to dress the nose. If your container has a through loop with a top closing loop attached to the bottom of the container, you may need to spread the ears of the pack job so that it allows the closing loop to have a clean route up towards the grommets. Make your final fold. Make sure the bridle is routed up through the center of the pack job and begin closing the container, not catching any edges of material, which may cause the pack job to rotate during extraction. Make sure to hold the parachute in place with your hands as you're closing the flaps so that the action of you closing the container doesn't disturb your pack job. Make sure you read the owner's manual of your container so you orient the pins the way they should be. In this rig, the pin should be in a frowny face position with the pin pointed to the right, and you're looking right side up at the container. Make sure you use the correct pin on the bridle.
For the top pin, we use the pin closest to the canopy end of the bridle.
Make sure you route the bridle cleanly out of the container without it wrapping around anything that can induce an off-heading. This should be the pin farthest away from the pack job. The last part of the pack job is packing the pilot chute. Squeeze the mesh into a long tube, fold it in half, and then S-fold the bridle on top of the mesh. It's good to keep the pilot chute loosely wrapped when you're packing it. The tighter you make it, the longer it's going to take to inflate when it's time to pull. With a 42-inch pilot chute, usually there's no handle, so you create a bulbous handle out of the bulk of the pilot chute at the apex of the pilot chute. Try to make it into a torpedo shape so it easily slides into the BOC. Make sure to account for all of your tools when your pack job is finished. If one of them is missing, most likely it's inside your pack job.